Okay, so let's get into personal statement writing. A personal statement could be applied to several different opportunities that students could encounter, right? There are, in a way, there's one for the SAP appeals that occur for the satisfactory academic performance appeals for students to get their financial aid approved. Some students potentially are on the borderline of sort of dropping out of school, so they need to appeal. So then there's a personal statement that goes along with that. There's also one just generally for the general scholarship application, which is pictured here on the slides. Are we familiar with this, folks? With this general scholarship application? Have we applied to the general scholarship application before? Yeah, for sure. And there's also, and I'll kind of like take this personal statement category and sort of generalize it too. There's also folks that need to complete what's called a statement of purpose. And this is for graduate school. So folks that entered the MA or the MA program, like Dan, you had a phone out for the MA program in English, right?
I don't remember.
You don't remember? It's okay. It's okay. I was looking back. I was like, I don't remember if I did it either for the English one. But I know, okay, so I took an example of the biology department. So for the Masters of Science in Biology, you do have to complete a statement of purpose to enter the program. So it's just something important to keep in mind that we're going to start seeing students, more and more coming in throughout this sort of period of the semester, of the spring semester, that are going to be looking for support in completing these types of personal statement assignments. So what is the personal statement? We want to think about like, how do you become successful in completing this, right? How do we get that scholarship? How do we get into that graduate program? Like all writing, it comes down to the keys to success are purpose and audience, right? So we want to think about if it's for a scholarship, right? You want to the purpose of it is to demonstrate a need and scholarly strengths. So potentially there are personal sort of challenges that this student has encountered, right? Where getting some financial aid would support them, in overcoming those challenges, right? Or to carry on, whatever sort of scholarly strengths they have. If there's something they're studying a subject that they're particularly passionate about, and they, even have aspire to have some sort of breakthrough with regards to their field, right? That's things that you want to demonstrate in that kind of writing. For grad school, right? It's also to demonstrate strengths, the scholarly strengths, but also a passion, for the field of study. And this is something that, I think for some students it's difficult to sort of encapsulate, and then they face those challenges when it comes to writing about why they are studying in the disciplines that they're studying in. Particularly and I've noticed this maybe with some STEM students too, where it's like a means to an end potentially, right? Or they haven't been asked in the past to articulate particularly why they chose that field. But there is a story there. And that's the important part, is the telling of a story to reach an audience, right? So how do we get through to them? How do we compel them to support our endeavor, whether it be give us a scholarship or let us enter your grad program? It is, so we want to think about our audience the entire time, because they are inextricable from our purpose. They're closely tied to it. In this sort of loop, the little keychain loop so they're all tied together, right? The scholarship committees, are the folks that we want to be writing to. They don't know who we are, as students, as we're, when we're applying for these scholarships. So that's why it's so important to be able to connect with them through the storytelling that we in this kind of narrative-based writing, as well as college admissions committees too. They get thousands of applicants potentially, depending on how competitive the program is. And this is where this writing becomes crucial for the success of the student. Any questions so far about personal statements? Cool. Have we encountered personal statements this semester? Yep, for sure. So yeah, kind of continuing on the keys to success here, what I want us to focus on, and this is where we kind of come in, is in the revision process mostly, right? Potentially there might be some brainstorming that happens. I think that part we're really good at, just from what I've observed. I think, and I'm not to say that we're weaker in the revision section, but I just think this is an important part to sort of emphasize when it comes to supporting this kind of writing, which is maybe a little bit more on the creative side. It could potentially be, right? And this is not something that we're particularly taught enough about when it comes to that sort of personal narrative writing. So what we really want to do in order to reach our audience, right, is to show and not tell. Like every English teacher has ever said. right? So not just saying I'm passionate about writing, right? Right, Angie? Angie and I, sorry, context. Angie and I were at a presentation this past Saturday, and this slide is taken directly from Angie's presentation. So thank you so much, Angie. Round of applause for Angie. So Angie presented to aspiring college students. These are high school Latinas for the Hope Foundation, which is Hispanas Organized for Political Equality. And so these are youth leaders that are come together for a youth leadership program, and they get a whole Saturday filled with programming to support their success in both civic engagement, but also scholarly endeavors. In this case, getting to college. So Angie and Malin helped me to facilitate a presentation in supporting their application process, right? So the personal statement. Particularly for them, it was the personal insight questions for the Common App. But yeah, just like it was important for them to understand, it is really, getting beyond just the surface level. I want to go to college because, I want to be successful. It's like, well, what does that mean to you, right? How are you going to get there, right? Like, how does that matter to you? Or so what? Like, what are you going to do with that degree? What impact are you going to have on the campus? What impact are you going to have on the community? Particularly for that group of students, they're there because they are, advocating and also trying to reach levels of political equality, right? So political representation, meaning potentially running for office in the future, or even just being involved generally on a civic level, right? So there's certain parts of student stories that need to be highlighted in this kind of writing. So personal statements. So I think it's important that a good way to sort of construct our thought process when it comes to writing personal statements is these persuasive devices of ethos, pathos, and I'm actually throwing in kairos rather than logos. So are we familiar with kairos? Yeah, for sure. I feel like that one's not highlighted as much as it should be. But I'm throwing it in there anyways. Logos might take a back seat at this moment, but it's because of the particular style of writing. So what makes a personal statement compelling? So, thinking about these rhetorical devices of ethos, pathos, logos, and kairos, right? In this case, leaving logos a little behind. Ethos, building up the student's authority, right? What expertise do they have? And it's difficult for students, I find, to articulate themselves as experts in anything, because they feel like they're in this budding stage where they are not quite there yet. And in that sort of in-between phase, it's tough to be confident in the writing, when it comes to personal statements. So I'm identifying that as a potential intervention that we can have with a student when we're revising them, especially to give them that moment of building up the student's authority, in that moment. So make sure to highlight their ethos, right? What is their cultural background? How does that influence, their journey, their goals, their dreams? And then also, what experience do they have? On a pragmatic level, what jobs have they had? What volunteer opportunities have they had? What even as the Career Center has highlighted, right, the group projects that they've done throughout their program, right? Those are things that could be highlighted as very impactful to their character and also their academic journeys or professional journeys. Pathos. So this is the, really the gut punch that helps to cut through the sort of maybe the experience for the in terms of connecting to whatever committee is evaluating these personal statements, right? So we want to think about sort of the emotional connection to the audience, right? Is there a way that we can enhance this personal statement to have an emotional impact, right? Has something occurred, for this student where they've needed to overcome it, right? Whether it be personal or familial. This is kind of like a human thing. We all experience challenges, especially during our academic careers. So it's important to ask students, if maybe they give a kernel of it, right? And of course, this is where it gets a little difficult, right? Because we don't want to put students in a situation where they feel like they need to disclose everything, because there's certain things that you don't want to disclose to a stranger because it might do harm to yourself, or to others potentially, right? But that's where we, as writing tutors, it's a nuanced conversation that occurs, right? How much can we tell and give to our audience here so that they can feel a connection to this real life experience, And I trust you all to make those judgments. And if there's ever a time where, you feel uncomfortable with what's being shared out, or the student seems to be uncomfortable, feel free to pull back. Focus on the other aspects, right? Build up that authority instead. Build up that kairos instead. But speaking of kairos, so kairos is timeliness or the relevance, right? So for I think this is really applicable to grad students. So there, especially folks that are going into fields that that are already, getting to that point where they see themselves a little bit more as professionals and understand the discipline that they're getting into, whether it be like medical school or any sort of humanities graduate work, right? The need for there to be more professionals in that field. For example, like Daniel over here being in the master's program for English, right? Jaden being in the master's for history, right? There is a sort of, in terms of the relevance of the work that you're doing, there's even pressure from executive branches and okay, here's Alex getting into politics and stuff, right? Apologies. We're in a closed room. There aren't any students right now, but I do want to say that there is a relevance to the work that you're doing, the scholarly work, right? We need historians to be accounting for what's going on so that we have a good account for Sean as well. Thank you, Sean. And thank all the folks in here. Thank you for the studies that you're doing, right? The humanities work that you're doing. Everybody in here is humanities. It is crucial right now in these very inhumane times that you all are committing to the humanities, that you all are still critically thinking, right? And that is something that I don't think we get enough of an opportunity to highlight in most academic spaces, because we're so focused on our studies, right? Whatever sort of text that we're analyzing, whatever sort of theorists that we're analyzing, right, and incorporating into our work, there's not enough of an opportunity for us to think about how our work is going to make an impact on society. And it will. I promise you it will. As somebody that studied the humanities and that is here and contributing that knowledge to y'all to help to inspire and hopefully motivate y'all, it works. It helps and it works, and you will have an impact. But being able to verbalize that or to articulate that in a personal statement is crucial. So that's how I would like to think of Kairos, in this context, right? So just the way that I'm sort of hyping you all up right now and what you're doing, I want you to do that with the students that you sit with for personal statement writing. Does this make sense? Yeah. And I gave the example here of a student, being aware of sort of an ecological crisis that's occurring in the oceans. So Earth being pushed beyond its limit. That's a little headline that's on this slide. Earth being pushed beyond its limits as energy imbalance reaches record high. So State of Climate Report finds Earth's energy has moved dangerously out of balance, with oceans absorbing the vast majority of heat. So I highlight that because you all have in front of you a sample rough draft for a personal statement to apply to the master's program in biology here on campus. So would somebody like to read this one out loud? Jaden?
I have always been interested in biology and have taken many courses that have helped me develop a strong foundation in the field. Throughout my undergraduate studies, I gained experience in different areas of biology and worked on several projects that strengthened my understanding of scientific concepts and research methods. These experiences have prepared me well for graduate study and have motivated me to continue learning more about biology at an advanced level. I am particularly interested in pursuing further study because I want to contribute to scientific knowledge and develop skills that will allow me to succeed in a professional career. Overall, my academic background and passion for biology make me a strong candidate for this program.
Okay, this is somebody's rough draft. This is just their first take at applying to a master's in biology program, right? So what I want you to do is to take 5 minutes to discuss this sample personal rough draft for the master's in science in biology program at Cal State LA. So let's do 2 teams, right? Let's do a team of 4 and a team of 3. We do have one tutor that's going to be joining us momentarily, so I'll have them sort of jump in with the team of 3. I think we could split up right here, if that's cool with you, and then we'll have the 4 over here. So take 5 minutes, in your groups, split down the middle. What suggestions would you have for the student to improve their personal statement writing? And then prepare to share that out with the rest of the team. Once again, thinking of the ethos, pathos, and kairos too, right? All right, time, folks. Thank you so much. Thank you for engaging there. All right, let's look at this once again. Okay, what do we got?
So one thing I think we sort of address, one of the, just like an overall thing, is the specifics. It's lacking specifics. It's very vague, and it doesn't touch on anything specifically.
And because there's no specifics, there's no pathos, there's no sense of passion, it goes back to the show don't tell thing, right? They're saying they're passionate, but we don't feel the passion because they're not being specific, they're not being focused or illustrative. And also as a result of the lack of specifics, it's not urgent. And so you don't get that sense of urgency. Like this is an opportunity that I'm trying to attack.
Interesting. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. What do we got over here? Anything else? Angie.
Another thing is like if you just take it line through line, it's like I've been interested in biology and I've taken many courses that have helped me. I think that's something that you can delve more into instead of just saying this got me into that. It's like, okay, well, what did you experience in that course that made you interested in it? Because that's like your origin. It's really important.
Absolutely.
Because this feels like it could apply to anyone. You know, it's not. There's no personality to it.
Absolutely.
I think this is Chentes, if I'm correct. I think I saw this right.
Oh, my bad. I roasted.
You have a biology major, no? Like other two?
We do melee.
Melee?
Yeah.
You must have a reflection.
No. Mela would write some fire. Mela was at that presentation on Saturday just for the personal insight questions. But no, y'all are pointing out some amazing things, right? And I think one thing that I'm noting, if I were to rephrase it in like a positive, way is, because certainly there's a lot that can be, critiqued here. The positive thing is I think there's a lot of jumping off points, right? Like Angie's pointing out right there, that sentence right there alone could be a whole paragraph of detail, right? Where you're talking about what classes you've taken that have led you down this path of being passionate about sciences, wanting to pursue a master's in science, right? Because, they could, with a biology degree, you could go and work in a lab, make a decent living, but why keep studying that? What is the point? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, just to piggyback what you said, yes, the foundation is solid. Like, it's a solid foundation, but it needs to be like Angela said, it could use pretty much like a line by line breakdown and like, let's fill these gaps, let's fill these gaps. You know what I mean? And just kind of go through it, and then everything would be extended. So hopefully if they had a computer, we would just like return, and take that first line, and then boom, 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 build it out. And then now the next one, how can we build this up? How can we add this, that, and the other thing in? And boom, 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 break that up and go through it like that, which would really be effective for something like this.
And what I'm kind of realizing is that every sentence in this could be a topic sentence.
Yeah.
It feels like a paragraph made out of topic sentences.
Absolutely, yeah. And as topic sentences too, they could have a little bit of nuggets of like personality, right? Like interspersed. But you're absolutely correct. I think that's a great way to approach this. So one recommendation here that's kind of emerging is if you get writing for personal statements or these types of writings, whether it be for a scholarship, for a graduate program, for maybe a SAP appeal, right? It's how do we take what's general here and build off of it, right? Because this could be a decent outline, like Monty was pointing out, right? You could convert it into an outline. Even then, with the student, maybe if you don't necessarily need to like edit their, hop on the computer, and do that for them, right? Ask them maybe make a copy. Make a copy of this, and let's hit enter a couple times and give it some space, and ask ourselves some questions like, how have you always been interested in biology, right? Or so what? Like you've taken some classes. So what does that matter? Like how does that matter? In the grand scheme of you as an aspiring scientist, or as and maybe they don't want to go as far as to say that, right? But I think one thing we could do in that moment too, and this is a subtle, kind of approach that I would recommend as a writing tutor, is to really hype them up that way. Like, wow, you have done amazing work so far. You are a scientist, even if you don't want to call yourself that, right? You are studying the sciences. You have a passion for it, right? But let's unpack that, right? And I think, as you've done, which so wonderfully is, hopefully this has kind of brought some ideas to the fold about how to approach this kind of writing, right? Is we can take like a sentence like that, right? Where it's, I'm particularly interested in pursuing further study because I want to contribute to scientific knowledge and develop skills that will allow me to succeed in a professional career, right? We ask ourselves like, how and so what? What professional career, right? How, have you pursued your interests, right? And that could look like, in that conversation, something like this. I'm particularly interested in pursuing further study in conservation and evolutionary genomics with Cal State LA professor, Dr. Andres Aguilar. My goal is to save endangered sea life from the negative impacts of climate change by providing evidence of their biological needs and importance in ocean ecology. I wish to join Dr. Aguilar's research team on the field and in the lab. I believe that I can contribute greatly to conservation efforts through the laboratory and critical analysis skills I have developed in my undergraduate program and internship at the Ocean Foundation. Right, so there's even from there's more jumping off points that can be developed, right? But I'd like you to imagine, with this, sort of more fleshed out version of this, just from this one sentence, like Andrew was pointing out, and you all were pointing out, as the rough draft being sort of like an outline. There's so much that can be unpacked just from asking them questions like, "How have you done this?" Right? So why does this matter to you? Why does it matter to you that you're interested in pursuing this, right? And at the end of the day, not everybody's going to be trying to save the world or save, the ocean or save that, right? But we can kind of nudge students to get a bigger picture of themselves in the larger scheme of the world. It is so easy in this day and age to be nihilistic, to think you don't matter, that your work does not matter. But I challenge you all, and I challenge you all to support students in challenging them to think about themselves in a larger scale, right? How is their work in academics or beyond having an impact? And in that way, you are both supporting the student through this very personal writing, but also themselves in developing, their own sense of self as academics, right? Does that make sense? So thoughts here with this. Does this sound like something we can kind of implement here too with our?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I know this for the most part, this is stuff that you all kind of understand. I just want us to have like this open conversation that we've had, right, to share out our own ideas, so that hopefully we can kind of borrow from each other's approaches. Honestly, it's like a chorus here. Like everybody's kind of in the same line, right? But yeah, no, for sure. Are there any other challenges that from the times you've all worked with personal statements thus far that you've seen beyond sort of the maybe more general, right? Maybe anything else that's come up?
I've seen a few times, but just too lengthy.
Oh, okay.
So like there's been a few that I've seen where it's not to exceed a page or a certain word count, and they're over it.
Yeah.
And then the thing is though, we look at it and most everything looks really good. Yeah. And then it's difficult to sort of see, like, it's good and it's also like not redundant. Which I had one student, it made it very difficult to like make edits, and I came down to like, all right, you know what this is, you know what you're shooting for. Is there anything in here you think you can just like, if you meet someone, you can just bring it up in conversation, and then we can kind of take it out here, because the lacking redundancy was huge. Like I never realized how much I was actually looking for something to be redundant. So I said, let's just cut that. Sure. Because you said the same thing twice, and they didn't have anything like that. So that was challenging actually. It was, and then she had to like stare at it and figure out things and like kind of talk out loud about certain things, and she figured it out, and we made it work. But that was something that was challenging.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's like the opposite of a problem, or I guess it is a problem in and of itself. But it's like it's good when there is that just amazing writing where it's like. It almost feels like an injustice to even leave some of it out, and that could happen in this kind of writing because it is so personal, right? You don't want to tell somebody what they should cut, right? But it is about informing them. What does your audience need to read here, right? What is the most important if you're thinking about your audience? If it be for some sort of graduate program, right? They do specify we want to hear what our program, particularly why it is of interest to you. In this case, for this example, I took this is Dr. Andres Aguilar because they are studying, or they're researching endangered sea life here on campus, right? So the more that you can sort of appeal to the audience by bringing them into the writing itself, because potentially, I don't know if Dr. Andres is one of the reviewers, right? They might be, because I know that the faculty members will kind of, read these applications too.
Then one other one. I did have one where it was real lengthy. And I was struggling with how to say what I needed to say to the person. Yeah. But basically, they had a lot of like, for lack of a better term, the sob story. Oh, sure. And I was like, everyone's gonna have this. Yeah. So you could just put a little bit of this. Sure. Because they're already expecting most people to have this in there. But now let's get to the
Yeah.
where you're gonna make a difference, how you're gonna make a change and be impactful.
Yeah.
So and that was easier to trim, and it was actually difficult to say to the person. Like I was trying not to say sob story, but I was like, how do I not say this?
No, I've read those two.
Yeah.
I've read those two where it's a lot of just a lot of the challenges, right? Without the turn. There isn't the turn of like overcoming the challenge, right?
Yeah.
They'll even just set it and forget it with regards to, and then as a reader, you're expecting them to kind of have this heroic sort of overcoming, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be that clean, right? And potentially forcing something like that can be a disservice to somebody, right? But that's where it's important in that moment to just have a very human conversation, right? About like where you're even informing them of how they are right now. The fact that they're here is even a testament to them overcoming that challenge,
Yeah.
right? So then kind of, having that turn even during the session, right? This sort of heroic turn there. But yeah, I've read some that are like, I hate my mom. And like a whole section of that, and then that's it. You know what I mean? And that's where we have that conversation about like maybe there was this sort of antagonistic dynamic, right? But how did you cope and how did you move forward, right? And how does that apply to what you're applying to here, right? Which I think at that time was like some scholarship or something, right?